So, welcome everybody back to Veil of Sound. It's our regular video Sunday interview, but not with anybody, not with your average Joe from the street. No, with somebody that a lot of us have been following for decades through all his various projects. Stephen Brodsky from Mutoid Man is here with us. So, Stephen, thanks for joining the show.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So the first question here at Veil of Sound is always, what is the musical band merch that you are wearing today? I have a notion, but I'm not sure.
Well, you can sort of see his face. Oh yeah, the rest of his body's getting cut off. But it's the man in purple, the man, the myth, the legend.
So is that
Prince.
I'm
wearing a Purple Rain shirt from Rucking Fountain.
Would you say that guitar player, musician, songwriter, singer, let's call him Prince for, I don't want to say Tough Cap. Is that an influence on you?
Absolutely. I don't think you can be a musician who was born in the 70s and not have some sort of influence from Prince. His guitar playing can be sneaky. There's obviously the very sort of in-your-face guitar solo moments of like Purple Rain or Let's Go Crazy. But as far as like his rhythm playing and some of the ways that he just sneaks in the guitar as a layer in like, more sort of production dominated or synth dominated songs of his, he can do it all. He loved Jimi Hendrix, and
obviously
I love Jimi Hendrix. So I love hearing the reinterpretation of Jimi Hendrix through Prince with the 80s. And people often wonder, like, what would Jimi Hendrix have done if he had lived? Well, probably be jamming with Prince, or maybe making music in a similar way. Prince just checks a lot of the boxes for me, as he does for many.
Obviously for many, but then like one of the ultimate questions in music, of course, is would you then also say that his Super Bowl performance at halftime performance was the best there ever was?
The best I've ever seen. I haven't seen all of the halftime Super Bowl performances, to be completely honest here. But I have a very vivid memory of watching that, and it felt surreal. There were just moments where I wasn't sure what I was watching, or if it was based in reality, or if I was just having some sort of hallucination, or it was in a dream, which is really the best thing that you can ask for when being engrossed within or by a performance is it for it to just knock you out of your own brain.
That is a very interesting point. We'll come back to that a little later. Just for everybody, I wanted to do this a little different, and I will throw in every once in a while, I will throw in a triplet of famous rock bands, and you have to choose one of them, and maybe also explain if there is something from these bands reflected in the sound of Mutoid Man. So let's start with the first one. And you'll also see that I tried to build like an alphabetical bridge. ZZ Top, Zappa, or Zeppelin? Which one would you choose? And is there something of that choice's sound in Mutoid Man?
Well, I'd have to go with Zeppelin. I'm the most familiar with the catalog as an entirety, or in its entirety, I should say, with Led Zeppelin out of those three choices. And Led
Which is also easy because they have the smallest catalog.
Yeah, good point. That's a band that was heavily on my radar at a very young age, at a very formative age when I was learning how to play guitar. And was also an interesting sort of bridge between my generation of music and my parents' generation of music. It was like maybe the first thing uh, as like a young adult that I feel like we could agree upon. Um, where I pulled Zeppelin records out of my dad's collection as a, per suggestion of my music teacher at the time. And not only was he correct in assuming that my dad had Zeppelin records to pull, but I loved them instantly as soon as the needle, hit the vinyl. I was just like, oh, this could have come out today. This doesn't sound like it was something from before my time. Didn't feel that way, and I remember playing along to those records when I was learning how to find my way around a pentatonic scale.
Mm-hmm.
My instructor was like, you can just put on a Zeppelin record and play the blues to it.
Mm-hmm.
And he was right. And so that's kind of something I think out of those choices that you gave me at a very young formative age, that's something that's shaped the feel of my playing.
Mm-hmm. I was pretty sure that you would choose Zeppelin, although I had also imagined you might have chosen Zappa because of his understanding of humor in music. Which leads me to one question, which I still haven't found an answer to. Who, and that's also, I think, something that I like about Mutoid Man. It's a very, very good band, but it's not a band that is overly serious about, how should I say? I think Mutoid Man of all of your projects is the most fun one for us as listeners. It's a very, very cool band. But I've never figured out who is the Mutoid Man.
Oh, well, have you ever played the video game Smash TV?
No, I didn't.
Well, I would suggest playing Smash TV, and
Okay.
if you can find it in an arcade, just make sure you have enough quarters or tokens to
Okay.
get to the end of the first level,
Okay.
and you'll find the Mutoid Man. And the Mutoid Man
Ah.
is the boss of level 1 of Smash TV, and he's part man, part tank, and you need a special weapon in order to beat him. And luckily, there are several special weapons that work. Your standard gun ain't going to do it. The bullets are
Mm-hmm.
just going to reflect off of them. But yeah, I was just texting with a friend about this. He sent me an image. It was a photo that he had taken at his local arcade, and it was of an arcade Smash TV game console. And so my response was, man, that is still one of the most fun level 1s out of any video game that you can play.
That is
Yeah,
somewhat what I expected. That is something what
you
I
didn't do your
expected.
homework. You haven't played Smash TV.
No, remember, I'm from Europe. We didn't have arcades over here. It's just that's the
Really?
bummer. No, we
That
didn't.
that makes sense. I don't have any strong memories of ever having been to a video arcade game in Europe.
Yeah. See?
Yeah, you guys hate arcades and air conditioning. What's up with that?
Well, at the moment, we all love air conditioning over here in Germany because it's Monday, July 10th, and it's friggin' hot out here. So at the moment, I would choose
Oh
air
yeah,
conditioning over nearly everything. Let's get back to the new
fair
record.
enough.
The new record is your first full length after 6 years. That long gap between the records, is it due to the pandemic, or is it for various other reasons? Like you did a lot of stuff with Cave In, for example. Ben did a lot of stuff with Converge. So is it just the pandemic, or is there more to the long absence?
The pandemic is definitely part of it, as well as the other things that you mentioned. You know, in 2018, we had a very tragic time in our lives, losing Caleb Schofield, bass player and, you know, longtime member and friend in Caven. And so, you know, that inspired Caven to put the wheels back on and do some work to raise money for his surviving family. And that certainly contributed to a lot of my bandwidth being taken up by other things. And Ben sustained an injury at the beginning of 2019. So that sidelined him from doing anything Mutoid Man related. At the beginning of 2019, we were still able to do stuff. We had Chris Maggio filling in on drums. Chris Maggio from Trap Them, Sleigh Bells, Coliseum. And that worked for a while. And then in the summer of 2019, we decided to part ways with Nick Caggio, our original bass player. And that created a delay in things. We're all scattered as well. Like I live in New England, Massachusetts. Ben lives in Los Angeles, and you know, Nick lives in New York City. When I moved out of New York City, that placed all three of us in different places. And then when we got Jeff Matz on board, Jeff lives just outside of Portland, Oregon. So absolutely great addition to the band. And yet we're still all scattered. So, you know, being long distance, it makes things tricky. You know, everyone kind of gets on their own schedules and in their own bubbles. And, you know, Jeff also, of course, plays in High on Fire, and High on Fire is a fully functional band, actively touring and recording and such. So, yeah, I guess all these things just sort of turned into a 6-year period between records, and it's crazy to think about, but I guess that's how it goes, you know.
It's also funny because I imagined a lot of the reasons that you just said, you know, the departure of Nick. I had heard about Ben's physical problems and all of that. But at the same time, I still have a feeling as if all people involved in Mutoid Man are somewhat like workaholics. Like you work a lot, you do a lot of stuff. And as you are not only working with Mutoid Man, but with the other projects, I guess that it's also even more difficult to find time to work together, write together, rehearse together, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we only have so much bandwidth for one thing at a time, really. And if you want to do that one thing that you're doing, it's important to really invest yourself as much as you can in it and not get too sidetracked by other things, which is difficult because in our little network, our little world of music, scheduling is incredibly important, and it's a constant thing that's happening. There's constantly communication about who's available when, and blocking off this time for this thing, and making sure that everybody's schedules align. So it is difficult to stay focused on one thing naturally, just given the logistics involved in being a part of so many things.
Yeah, and then nothing should come in between, like Ben's injury, right? Because then everything else that has been scheduled is overthrown. I already said that I think that it's a very, very fun project. But at the same time, like you said, you have to invest yourself a lot into this Mutoid Man concept to get that razor thin edge between too much fun and still seriousness, right? Isn't that the way? Like it's a very thin line to get it correct.
Yeah, I think the line is heavily drawn by preparedness and chops and knowing the material, playing well, being well rehearsed. You can't really laugh at that. And if you do, I mean, I've found myself laughing out loud at performances that were just so great and inspiring and so technically proficient or so seemingly off the cuff in such a cool way, that it makes my head spin, and I'll laugh or I'll chuckle to myself or something, you know,
Yeah.
and not as a joke, like wow, this is, you know, watching musicians or listening to musicians who really set the bar, and make me feel inspired and wanting to be as good as that or something. I love that feeling.
Hmm.
Um, so that's the type of laughter I think that we like to inspire amongst people. And, you know, obviously a song like Date with the Devil from the Warmones record, I mean, there's obvious like funny jokes to that, and the whole concept of, you know, that song I found to have a lot of room for just tongue-in-cheek lyrics and stuff that would just make people smile, kind of like that same feeling I had as a youngster, um, discovering my rock and roll, not Led Zeppelin, as
Hmm.
we discussed earlier, but like putting on Appetite for Destruction for the first time and being in my little world with my old school Sony Walkman and feeling like, oh my God, I've got this thing strapped to my head right now that my parents would flip over if they heard some of the shit that was being said in these lyrics. But, you know, it's this cool little secret world of mine that I felt like I had away from them. And, you know, again, at such a young age, that record and that feeling certainly stuck with me. And I feel like, you know, bands and projects outside of Mutoid Man, it never really fully explored that type of feeling. But you know, with a song like Date with the Devil, or uh, trying to think of some other uh, things that come to mind with Mutoid Man. I guess that's the most obvious one, but that is clearly like an extension of that childlike love for Guns N' Roses, you know. And it's cool. It's cool to have an outlet for that, and it distinguishes it from other things that I do, which is important as
Would you, when looking at Mutoid Man, also in comparison to other of your projects, would you say that Mutoid Man is the one which, if we had to set a time to it, is the most 80s project of all of yours?
Yeah, it's possible. There's a lot of 70s baked into it too, because one of the early inspirations for the band was Sir Lord Baltimore. And
Mm.
that was a power trio from Brooklyn back in maybe as early as the late 60s. I can't remember. I'll have to
It is
double
the late
check.
60s
Uh,
and then like mid to late 70s. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so when Mutoid was first getting together, that was a very powerful thing in our minds, was the image of this band. Like, how could a band become this good in Brooklyn in the late 60s, which just it in our minds it felt like, just thinking back to a New York City back in that time, and just wow, what was that like? You know, like a war zone of sorts. You know, but this band was so tight, loose in the best ways possible, and there was just a wildness to their whole thing that was so inspirational. Um, I believe Typo Negative started in the 80s, if I'm not mistaken, or at least
I think so.
Carnivore.
Yeah, I think so.
So that should also be a band that, as far as injecting humor into our music, that might even be closer to Mutoid Man than I would say Guns N' Roses, because Typo Negative is another band that was born in the you know, in Brooklyn, and they've always had this element of humor to their music, and you know, I think there's something even more Zappa-like to
Mm.
the approach that Typo Negative takes than Guns N' Roses, and Yeah, so it's funny. That's a band that I heard, years ago as like a teenager watching Headbangers Ball on TV, trying to
Alternative
absorb
Nation.
exactly and trying to absorb all this great music from the 90s as a teenager. Typo Negative never hit me. Maybe it was the humor that I couldn't appreciate at that time, but it's just kind of funny that I moved to New York, 11 years ago, almost 12 at this point, and then all of a sudden, Typo Negative, oh, something clicks. It just hits me. Um, so
Maybe
maybe
it's
I
the
just had to be in
environment.
the right place at the right time,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You've already mentioned it, there is some kind of 70s vibe, 80s vibe. And I've read in a few reviews about Mutoid Man that people call this like nostalgic music, which I partially understand. Let's get this straight. This is not you trying to emulate the 80s or the 70s. This is just your version of, let's say, heavy rock music, which of course has its roots in 60s, 70s, 80s, but it's not like you're trying to sound like any 80s band.
No, you're absolutely correct. I think the band and the approach and uh, the the excitement about making music for all of the individuals within the band has always been more about like mixing things up and taking something from this era or this decade or this genre and kind of smashing it together. um, there's something fun about the swagger of rock and roll in the 70s mixed with like the edge of punk in the 80s,
Mhm.
and then uh, elements of technical ability from metal in the 90s. Plus, if we stay in the 90s for a moment, there's the whole wave of like basically the first wave, I should say, of like emo,
Mhm.
hardcore, screamo, punk with some metal infused in that is very inspirational on the some of the fireworks that you hear in Mutoid Man, or some of
Mhm.
the arrangements, some of the abbreviated song lengths, and just getting to the point. And sometimes, the riff suit nature of things, where we might not repeat a part, and that was very common with the punk and hardcore music that we were into in like the mid to late 90s. Like sometimes the best part of a song could be 4 seconds long and then you never hear it again.
Which is also like the basis for hip hop, right? It's just funny to see that as well. You've just mentioned song lengths, and it's very interesting because a lot of the songs are very, very straightforward. Um, there is only one track which is longer than 5 minutes. Two are clicking in under 3 minutes, and another three are under 4 minutes. So is that also something that you really, I don't want to say work on, but do you try to basically chop off as much as possible with the songs from Mutoid Man?
Well, a lot of the arrangement work is under the guidance of Ben.
Mhm.
And, it's important because I think for what Ben does and his abilities as a drummer and everything that he puts into playing drums, it's important for him to execute his vision and to have his head really wrapped around something in a way that he can control it, and he feels like he's on top of it, so to speak. So I'm totally cool with that. I'm not always the best at arrangements. I'm more about like coming up with a riff or a theme, or just the seed of an idea that someone like Ben could run with. And yeah, I think for someone who plays as hard and as passionately and as thoughtfully as Ben, sometimes having an abbreviated song is best because he can just really throw himself into something. And it's not about a long distance run; it's about this like bombastic sprint. And I think that's fun for people to see as well. People coming to Mutoid Man shows, just seeing us really throw ourselves into like a 2 or 3 minute chunk of time, and then take a breath, and then throw ourselves into the,
Do the next one.
the same little sprint, the 100-yard dash of sonic fireworks all over again. And yeah, again, that's also something that is different, especially for me, from the bands that I'm normally associated with, like with Caven. um it's sort of the opposite of what you were just describing, where it's very rare to find us playing songs under 3 minutes, especially in 2023.
Mm. The second triplet of bands that you have to choose from, and maybe for the reason of, okay, they inspired Mutoid Man. Van Halen, Void, or Van der Graaf Generator?
Van Halen, hands down.
That was an easy one,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I can't really argue with that. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind with Van Halen as a guitar player is, especially with early Van Halen, um, the sense that you were listening to a single performance on guitar from top to bottom. There weren't many tricks in the way of like overdubs, or the guitar didn't really move, it just sort of sat in this one place.
Yeah.
And it went from rhythm playing with little sparks of lead, bits and expressions, to full on lead guitar solo, and then the rhythm guitar track wasn't there because there was no second guitar player in Van Halen. And as the lone guitar player in Mutoid Man, I found that very inspiring. And yeah, it's rare to hear a rhythm guitar track underneath a guitar solo in our records for that reason.
You have mentioned the fact that something, or not something, all of you need to be well prepared. You have to know your material, and you have to know what you're doing before entering the studio, or also before you perform live or rehearse. So let's talk a little bit about the songwriting process for Mutoid Man. How do you write songs for a band that is basically a bizarre love triangle between Oregon, California, and Massachusetts?
That's a great question. Well, with this record, we had so much material kicking around, from the just insane amount of work that we put into the band once Nick came on board. And we had song ideas, riffs, little sparks of ideas that range back to the Bleeder days. And so we got this thing called a riff bank, and it's basically just a Dropbox link where if any of us have song ideas, we make little deposits into the riff bank. And this thing is just jammed with all types of stuff. It ranges from like full on jams that we've had at rehearsals to me just kind of scatting into my iPhone with like a rhythmic idea that maybe at some point I'll translate onto guitar. Videos of me at like 6 a.m. in my underwear next to a cup of coffee, just riffing all caffeinated and seeing what comes out of my brain. So this stuff just has been kind of building and building, and marinating, so to speak. And so when it came time to put together the Mutants record, there were just some obvious choices for things to elaborate on, or to go back to, or to build upon. And that was really the basis for it. And then when we got together to actually jam on stuff as a band, naturally, you turn on your amp and you're waiting for the tubes to warm up, and you're making sure all your pedals are in the right configuration.
Turn it to 11.
Yep, this one goes to 11. And warming up your fingers and such. And Jeff might start just playing something that is right off the top of his head. You know, he's not super well versed in the tuning that Mutoid Man plays in, which is it's drop B. I think Jeff is more of like a drop D standard player. So for him, like drop B is sort of this new territory in a cool way. Whereas in contrast, I mean, I've been playing with this tuning since I was, you know, a year or two into playing guitar. So I've got my head so wrapped around it that in some ways, it's almost detrimental to surprising myself, you know. And I remember Jeff was just sort of noodling one day on this little thing, and I was like, "Wow, that is so cool!" And I'm sitting there trying to think of what timing is that, you know? And I'm counting it. I'm counting the timing, and I'm like, "Oh, it's in 5. That's cool. That's very Mutoid Man. All right." I'm listening to it and watching where his hands are going. Kind of, I lock into the pattern, and then Ben's right there along with me, and you know, within just a few minutes, we've got the basis for what became the song "Unborn" on the new record. So things like that happen too, and you know, that song especially very much bears the stamp of Jeff and bringing this like heavier, more twisted, dark side of riffing to the band. Whereas, you know, in contrast with Nick, Nick comes from a more sort of like neoclassical type of background and playing and influence, and you can hear that on Siren Song. Siren Song is a piece that we co-wrote with Nick, and you know, it was his idea to do the big chords for the chorus, and then the chorus tag has that little neoclassical run that I don't even know what time it's in, but that was fun trying to decipher like the timing of that little run. It comes naturally now. But yeah, just to illustrate the differences between those two guys and kind of how things came together. I think this record, Mutants, is especially unique for that reason. You know, you've got 4 people writing, and actually, if you want to throw Chris Maggio into the mix, he was present for jamming on some of the early ideas for Siren Song. I remember we were on the Mastodon tour, and we were just warming up in the venue bathroom. It had this great acoustics, and we were having, you know, just a little jam in there, and we showed him what we had at that time for Siren Song, and so yeah, he actually learned that song, a very early version of it. So, you know, just a lot of writing talent and personality on this record. Pretty cool.
But what I like about the way that you describe it is that the band doesn't have one main songwriter. It sounds like a very organic and also very democratic kind of approach to writing and constructing songs.
Yeah, it's really just whatever makes people excited. You know, if there's a spark of excitement in anyone, then that's cause for celebration, and that usually leads to, all right, well, let's file that away, or oh, cool, I could add this to it, or we could harmonize this, or hey, what if we did that twice and then went halftime? And you know, these conversations get started with ideas and you know, and sounds and and little bits of, you know, whatever, just sparks of music and things happening, and as long as our ears are open to it and we're just kind of tuned into what everyone else is doing, then that's when some real fun stuff happens.
Sounds also like a lot of nerd talk.
Oh yeah, but I mean, as nerdy as we can get, you know. I'm sitting there sometimes like literally just counting a drum beat that Ben is doing like in front of him, like, is this right? Like, am I getting it? Like, where's the one on this damn thing? But once you get over the hump of confusion and these bits of these mysterious rhythms or riffs or something that someone's trying to communicate in a musical way starts to make sense, and it becomes a natural thing, and it becomes part of your own musical DNA. Well, that's really transformative and cool.
You have now mentioned a few tracks off of a new record. One track that I would like to talk about is Setting Sun, which is the last track on the record. It's the longest one. And actually, if anybody wants to draw a comparison to Cave In, that would be the track that I feel most people would refer to as the most Cave In-ish song, even though there are still strong differences. But my question here is, how do you know which track or which riff or which part suits which band?
I've run into this before, and sometimes it's just trial and error. In the case of a song from the last Cave In record, Wavering Angel, it's funny you mentioned Setting Sun, because Wavering Angel is also the closing track on the last Cave In record, Heavy Pendulum. And that was originally something that I had allocated for Mutoid Man. And I remember Nick especially took a liking to an early version of that song. And he and I worked on that together at a couple different, little jams that we had. And so he actually pushed along an early version of that song. And I kept having these feelings about where we were at with that particular track, and the feelings were that I was hearing things on a separate guitar track or another guitar line accompanying things that I was doing, and then that sort of opened up the whole idea of what became the intro of that song, which that was a later development. And I just realized, well, this is a 2-guitar song. If this thing really is going to go someplace, then I can't be the only guitar player in the song. And so that automatically, in my mind, sort of started to reimagine it in a different arena. And that arena was Cave In, And so, I remember mentioning it to Ben, like, hey, Cave In we're writing some stuff, and this song Wavering Angel, I think it really is meant it's meant to be played with 2 guitars. It's not something we worked on as a full band in Mutoid Man. So I didn't feel too strange about extracting it from Mutoid and bringing it over to Cave In world. And thankfully it wasn't a big deal. So yeah, that's really one strong sort of alarm that goes off in my mind when working on something. Like, is this meant for 2 guitars? And especially with Cave In, like, I mean, the way that I write is very much with Adam in mind. Like, how would Adam approach this? How would he play it? Because he's got a style and a feel all into his own. And oftentimes the way that he reflects something not only makes it better, but it makes it more suitable for Cave In. So in Mutoid Man, I've got free reign. I'm the only one in that frequency range, making all those squeedly Ds and squeedly doos and stupid noises with my dumb pedals. And, so it really comes down to, is this a 1-guitar or 2-guitar song? And sometimes the pace of something too. I mean, Ben has a very specific range of like tempos and feels that he can explore that's different from JR. And when it comes to just fast blazing, sometimes like that rock and roll shuffle of Hot for Teacher, going back to Van Halen. That is Ben. Ben can sit in those pockets so effortlessly. And if I've got something that feels like it belongs up there, then Mutoid is the band to sort of bring it to. Like Graveyard Love from the new record. That is very much like Van Halen sort of you know, if Peter Steele was writing the lyrics for a Van Halen song.
So the third triplet, Thin Lizzy, Tesla, or T-Rex?
Oh, Thin Lizzy, 100%. Yeah, I think
Which is interesting that you choose Thin Lizzy, because there, to me, the biggest Lizzy appeal was ever the dueling guitars. But you're alone.
absolutely 100%, 100%. Yeah, I mean, arguably the template for all the things we love about Iron Maiden. And then of course Iron Maiden inspiring Metallica, and you know that yeah, just the feel and the sound of what that band created using two electric guitars. Um, that sort of, I don't know, Irish folk metal. So I don't know,
Yeah,
that
something
that
like that.
that like just putting a sizzle under that, like that traditional sort of you know, that Irish folk, these old timey things that were reimagined in the sense with, or the sensibility of rock and roll. But really, I think the songwriting of Thin Lizzy is probably closer to Mutoid Man, and we're, you know, if we're talking about humor and, you know, also trying to incorporate a little bit of sexuality into lyrics. You know, it's all there.
Yeah.
But it's done in a way that it has just the right amount of darkness that you know, you feel like there is a struggle just for Phil to be who he was at that time. I mean, you know, I think he is just such a anomaly in the world of rock and roll, even today.
Yeah.
So and Thin Lizzy is one of Nick Caggio's favorite bands, so you know there was constant references to Thin Lizzy in whatever creative ways that he could push the band, you know, in the Bleeder days and with Hormones and such. So yeah, there you go.
It also struck me that this is basically the third label that you are on now with Mutoid Man. Are you like really seeking new labels, or have you just not found the place to be?
Is it the third label?
It is the third.
Um, let's see. Our first record came out on Magic Bullet and
Yeah.
Non-Believer, so that was like a split release between the two. And then yeah, shortly after that we signed with Sargent House. So I mean, I look at sort of the way that the first record was rolled out. I can see, I mean, technically it was two different entities working together. I mean, I saw it as one effort, so it's kind of hard for me to imagine it as two separate labels, since the two labels were working together actively on that release. But we've been with Sargent House now for three records, and I think we have a cool little place in the world of Sargent House. You know, there's no band like Mutoid Man on the label.
That's
And
true.
I
That's
think they're
true.
appreciative of that. Yeah. um, I think we bring a lightheartedness to the world of Sargent House that is probably refreshing. And um, you know, it's for all the things that you mentioned earlier about the band not taking itself too seriously. Um, and yeah, I think that has, again, just a cool place amongst its other artists. And yeah, they came into our lives at a time when I feel like, especially for me, um, it was like, wow, here's a label that you know, they pay their artists regularly. There's not a lot of bullshit when it comes to putting out records. They want to keep costs down so that their artists get paid more quickly and more efficiently, but they're also not skimping out on packaging or recording. Like they want to do everything it takes to make the best elements for those things, to make the best music release possible. But at the same time, they're encouraging ways to be frugal and economical along the way, which is very helpful. And yeah, they've just been great cheerleaders for our band. Kathy is, she's just been very thoughtful over the years about where we belong, or where we should sit, or what bands we should tour with, or how often we should tour, or how much money we should ask for, just all the things that a good manager is attentive to. And there has been some concern over like whether the band gets taken seriously or not, because of the type of humor that we have, and maybe some of the imagery that is associated with our band. We're not like a photo heavy band. All of our records are illustrated, which I love. I mean, I love the work of John Santos, and his work and his ideas. I feel like they paint a cool picture of who we are. And you know but I think at this point, I think we've sort of proven ourselves to just have a formula that works well for us, and it works well amongst the other artists on Sargent House. And um, yeah, I don't think people really question it anymore.
Mhm.
We're all pretty comfortable with what the band has established. And again, as long as we go out there and we just have a sense of knowing what we're doing on stage, then you know uh you got to take that kind of seriously, I guess.
Mhm. Let's step back a little bit from Mutoid Man, and I have to ask this because a lot of people out there just simply love that. How does it feel to be in the same category now as The Roots or Paul Schaefer or The Tonight Show Band, as you are the band for 2 Minutes to Midnight?
Working with 2 Minutes to Late Night is that's just been a game changer in so many ways. Humor, obviously, and you know the things surrounding it has come up numerous times in our conversation. So that's an entity that's it's brought a lot of confidence, I think, to the ways that we presented ourselves, especially on stage. There's a pre 2 minutes and then post 2 minutes Mutoid Man, and those guys just basically giving us airtime to be a part of their show, having lines to memorize, but also giving us room to grow our own little characters. In the making of the show, from episode to episode, when it was sort of first being born, and pre-pandemic and bedroom covers and such. I mean, music's always been a part of it, but originally it was great, like going to St. Vitus early, doing these script readings, and everybody having these laughs in the room, just reciting all this wild shit, and then people just sort of running with it in their imaginations. And my character essentially being the guy that just pops off every time he's got a line. So everything's a scream, everything's at just like 11. We just ran with it. And then that also became like, well, what if every time I went to say something in between songs, I was singing it, So that may have come from like Tom Jones performances, or even Elvis, just looking for these personalities that were sort of larger than life or inspiration, and almost making characters out of themselves. So the show really kind of inspired us to do that. I feel like maybe we were on a trajectory to go that direction anyways, but once Guarcinio got involved, then it was like, all right, all bets are off. Let's just get as ridiculous with this as possible.
who came up with who came up with the different cover songs? Did you throw them into the ring, or did they ask you to do that particular track or another one?
Kind of going back to the conversation about how songs are written in the band. We just, at that point, with 2 minutes, it was just this team of people, much like in a writer's room. You know, when you hear about how shows are written or scripts are done and such, it's the same with music. You know, everybody just kind of throwing around these ideas. You know, what would sound good in a drop tuning? What if we did this but did it halftime? You know, how about this song, but like, you know, with each verse it gets sped up, so we start halftime, then we do cut time, and then it's like full-blown thrash by the end. Yeah, these are conversations that all sort of were we were all just a part of. And at the time when the show first started, we were all living in New York, you know, or various parts of Brooklyn, and so it was easy to get together. And you know, we would always see each other at the same shows, and you know, it was a very fun, creative time for that sort of thing. And we were all just kind of feeding off of each other, you know, each other's energy, and each other's ideas and vibes and such. So I mean, in the instance of Tom Jones, I just remember, I think it was maybe having a conversation with my grandmother, and she was talking about how much she loved Tom Jones and going to see him back in the 70s and 80s, and you know, getting loose and jumping up on a table and dancing, and you know, women were throwing their underwear at him and such. And I was like, well, damn, you know, we need some of that in Mutoid Man.
So for all the ladies out there, or the guys, or whoever, they want to have panties.
Well, damned, I just opened up a can of worms.
Pandora's box. You know, when thinking about, you know, you being a part of 2 Minutes to Late Night, I also asked myself, would you like to have Mutoid Man on a movie soundtrack? And if that is the case, which kind of movie would you like to be on?
I think we do well in sort of any modernization of, you know, pick your favorite stoner movie, Dazed and Confused, Smiley Face, whatever it is, whatever sort of modern version of that is coming out. I think we'd be great on a soundtrack for that, or like a, you know, any sort of like counterculture type of dramatization, or you know, I've seen people post videos of Mutoid Man just doing fucking gnarly skate tricks and shit, and I was like, damn, that really matches up nicely. You know, so throw us in some sort of like skate video, and I think we'd sit well in that world. Yeah, yeah. For
I
starters.
also could imagine you being on a movie with just like a 2020s version of the Brat Pack movies from the 80s, you know, like those teenage comedies, and you know, they need some like really high energy stuff. That could also be something where I'd see you in.
Perfect. Yeah, sign me up, man. I'm ready for it.
Okay, the last triplet and the last question before we come to our infamous quickfire round. Be careful. Queen, Queens of the Stone Age, or Queensryche?
Ooh. Wow. This might be the toughest one yet.
Yeah. Save the worst for last.
It's got to be Queens of the Stone Age, and that's because I've seen the band numerous times. it's the band that I probably studied the most.
Okay.
It's a band that, at their peak and with their formation, even, it's just a band that was a living, breathing thing very much at a time when, I was in it, this is what,
I know
when
what
did
you
they
mean.
start? In like the sort of the late 90s, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
98, 99,
So,
something like that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, it was just super exciting, knowing about Caius, mainly at the end of that band's tenure with Welcome to Sky Valley. I mean, that's most people's favorite record. And then knowing that while Caius had broken up, but there's this new band that
Mhm.
members of Caius are doing called Queens of the Stone Age. And, that first record just kind of picking up where Sky Valley left off. And how much that really rocked the world of, you know, myself, my friends, our little circle at the time. And, we were just all ears for it.
Mhm.
Seeing Queens of the Stone Age for the first time at a small record store in Shrewsbury. It was the Shrewsbury Newbury Comics. Um, and they were touring on the Rated R album. And then, venues that we were playing around that time with Caven, you just hear that record being played everywhere. And then later on in 2003, when they were touring on Songs for the Deaf, uh, being on tour with them, Lollapalooza, going around the country, just hearing those songs every night. And even prior to that, actually seeing them with Dave Grohl playing drums at Bowery Ballroom before the album came out. They were the greatest rock band on the planet at that moment.
Definitely.
And being in this tiny New York City venue, tiny for what you think of in terms of Queens at this point. I mean, there's Dave Grohl, there's Nick Oliveri, there's Lanigan coming out for his 2 or 3 songs. Troy was playing guitar at the time. And yeah, it was just the first 3 records that they were doing. And oh man, it was something. It just felt like seeing rock and roll history in the making. And
Mhm.
I'd never seen Dave Grohl play drums live before because as a teenager,
Man, don't get me
uh
started on that one. No,
I
no, no,
did have
don't go there, please. No, no, no. I still have a ticket for the show they didn't play.
well, so I'm
But I know
gonna
what
I'm
you mean.
gonna match you on this. I'm gonna
Yeah.
match you on this one because I had a ticket to see Nirvana with the Breeders in the fall of 1993. And at the time, I had gotten into smoking weed, but I wasn't sure how I felt about it. So I tried it maybe 3 or 4 times, and my brain just couldn't handle it. Like my imagination was already active enough as it is, and we just kind of threw it into these dimensions that I just couldn't comprehend and understand. And I could just feel my brain chemistry changing rapidly. And I could feel my soul getting all scrambled and shit. And, for a 14-year-old kid, this was just like, what am I doing? I think I fucked myself up. So I thought, well, shit, I was just so fixated upon it that I decided I'm going to confide in my parents and just kind of let them know, like, listen, I've tried weed a few times and I don't know what I think. And, I wasn't aware of what the consequences were going to be. And sure enough, I confide in them about this, and naturally they get upset, and they're like, well, you're grounded. You're not going anywhere for the rest of the month.
Thank
You're
you,
going to
Dad.
school and then you're coming home, and that's it. And I was like, well, wait a minute. I have tickets to see Nirvana with my cousin. And they're like, well, too bad. You'll have to catch them next time. And
And
I'll
there
never
was no
forget them
next time.
saying that because
Mm.
there was
No
no
next
next
time.
time. So I feel your pain, man. I feel
Yeah,
your pain.
yeah, yeah.
And seeing Dave Grohl play drums, at Bowery Ballroom with Queens was a bit of healing for that trauma. That goes all the way back to 1993. And then, later I feel like the healing had come full circle when Nirvana did it was the post Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction show at St. Vitus Bar in Greenpoint. And I got to sneak in, and not only did I see Dave Grohl play drums again, but I got to see Chris Novoselic play bass, and I got to see them play together. And I got to shake Chris's hand and say thank you for everything. And
didn't wash his for 3 weeks.
That meant a lot to me. What's that?
Didn't wash the hand for 3 weeks.
Yeah, why not? Savor the magic.
Yeah. So thanks for all the insight. And we always end the interviews here for everybody who's been following us. You hear this for like the umpteenth time. We always end the interviews here with our infamous quickfire round. You will get 2 alternatives, like Nirvana, let's say Bleach versus In Utero, or Queens of the Stone Age, Songs for the Deaf, or Rated R, or anything else that we could compare. And you have to choose one of the 2 alternatives and give a short explanation why. And as you've been talking about, seeing the future of music and the making, that automatically made my brain jump back to Landau when he was describing seeing Springsteen for the first time. And he said, I've seen the future of rock and roll. So, Springsteen versus Neil Young.
Neil Young, only because I've been into Neil Young longer. He hit me much earlier on in my sort of, I guess, formation as a musician and a music lover. Although I've really come around to Springsteen, and I ponied up for those fucking expensive concert tickets, and I loved every minute of it. So
next week, I'm going to check that bucket list.
All right, awesome.
Yeah. Don't ask how much for tickets.
Oh, I already know.
Yeah. Prog rock that was bigger than prog rock. Pink Floyd versus Yes.
Pink Floyd, same reason. It's just earlier in my musical DNA. I feel like they have more complete albums that I've enjoyed, whereas with Yes, it's very specific to like 2 or 3.
Yeah. Van Halen, you get 2 records to choose from. The self-titled one or 1984?
Self-titled. I understand that 1984 has more sort of well-known hits, and I mean, it's an amazing record. It's a tough choice, but I've also spent more time with Van Halen 1, and I
think it's a better album.
There's to me it sounds like I can imagine the band more. If I put on Van Halen 1, I can picture it happening more vividly than I can 1984. So visually, for me, I think it's more powerful.
As you have already mentioned, like Newberry Comics, or also the covers of Mutoid Man records always having like a cartoon cover or comic cover. Marvel versus DC.
As a youngster, I got into comics pretty heavily. And, years ago, I loved seeing the Infinity Gauntlet series, because up until that point, I'd never seen the characters that I knew and that I loved get so fucked up, like legit, like blown apart, looking completely disheveled, dead in some instances. So that was super powerful for me. So based on that, I'm just going to go with Marvel.
Did you then also, like, what was it, 2006, 2007? Did you also follow the Civil War thing that they had, this whole event?
I did not.
I also only got into it because of the movie, and I wanted to know what was the basis for it. And I must say, that series of comics might be one of the 10, yeah, probably 10 best comic series I've ever seen. You also already mentioned one of the two following bands, Iron Maiden. And no, I'm not gonna put them up against Metallica, but Judas Priest versus Iron Maiden.
I'm gonna go with Iron Maiden. My answers, as you can tell, are sort of based chronologically, like what hit me 1st.
Mhm.
And Iron Maiden got me through some tough times. I was signed up to go to what was called CCD, which is like this kind of religious school, and I went like once a week after, middle school, and it was these night classes. And in 7th grade, I was just fed up with it. So I remember walking in one day. I would walk there from home, and it was close to where I would take the bus to middle school. And I remember walking in, and I had my headphones on, and I was blasting Iron Maiden. I think it was Fear of the Dark, that album. And I sat down, and I didn't turn my Walkman off, and I kept my headphones on. And I remember the teacher just being like, and I was just like, nope, I don't care. And I just had the music blasting. And then I got written up, and it was a whole thing. And it was a conversation with my parents. And then they were finally like, okay, you obviously don't want to go to this anymore. And I was like, nope. And that was it. It was done. So I have Iron Maiden to partially thank for getting me out of CCD.
Two classic albums by a band that we also already had. A Night at the Opera versus A Day at the Races. Queen in the 70s in all their glory.
Sure. It's A Day in the Races. And what's the other record?
A Night at the Opera.
Oh, okay. Full disclosure, I'm familiar with neither of those records as like a whole. So I can't really tell you. I can't tell you which one sort of the feeling one gives versus the other. But I can tell you that one record that I rated from my dad's collection was a copy of Queen Jazz. Another record, I don't know it in its entirety, but the insert of the naked women in the bike race, I had that hung on my wall for a number of years.
Okay, last one before we go into any more puberty-related content. Last one, for obvious reasons right now. The new Indiana Jones movie is out, and you get to choose between Indiana Jones 1, Raiders of the Lost Ark, versus number 3, The Last Crusade.
I only watched Raiders in its entirety kind of recently, and I enjoyed it. I can't tell you what The Last Crusade is like. I'd have to really kind of go back to that one. If I had to pick one, I guess I'd go with the first one, but I'll tell you, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, that's the one that hit me as a kid. And
okay. Scared you as a kid?
That's the one that like scared me, intrigued me. I wanted to be there. I didn't, but then also I didn't want to go anywhere near it. It was cool. I was like, wow, this is what hell looks like. That whole scene where they drop the guy down and Karimas.
Yeah. And when they're basically hanging on the cliff, like Indiana is holding on with one hand to this like weird, already destroyed kind of bridge, and then he's like, I'll get your heart. Oh, yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. I can imagine that. For me, it was the same. I always liked Last Crusade because I think the buddy movie element is a little stronger in that one. But I can understand the dark appeal of the Temple of Doom. I can definitely see that. So, Stephen, thanks for all your time. Thanks for the wonderful insight. Thanks for the nerd talk. And it was a pleasure for me. I hope it was for you as well. For everybody who listened to this, if you like what we do right here, give us a follow on Facebook, on Instagram, wherever you get your social media. No, we're not on TikTok. We're not doing dances. Drop us a comment. Say what you think about the interview. And then maybe if you like to support us a little bit more, have a look at our website. There you can get all the details to our Patreon. And well, thanks for every kind of comment you give us, even the negative ones, which we only rarely have because of cool interview partners like Stephen. And therefore, Stephen, your chance for final last words.
Well, Thorsten, thank you for having me. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. And yeah, let's do it again sometime.
Anytime. So enjoy the rest of your day, my friend.